What fictional character death hit you the hardest? I watched that movie the night my sister died like 25 years ago. I was staying with my grandparents whilst my parents were at the hospital. They had no idea what the movie was about, so we watched it trying to take our minds off things. I can never watch that movie again. I'm tired, boss, tired of being on the road, lonely as a sparrow in the rain. I'm tired of never having a buddy to be with, to tell me where he's going to, coming from or why. Mostly, I'm tired of people being ugly to each other. I'm tired of all the pain I feel and hear in the world every day. There's too much of it. It's like pieces of glass in my head, all the time. Can you understand? I scrolled pretty far and didn't see this one listed. Poor John Coffey. It just occurred to me that the Ring must have tried to tempt Aragorn with power, like it does for everyone else, but Aragorn has spent his life resisting and refusing and turning down that power, because he felt he would become another Isildur, ushering in another end to mankind. Imagine as a kid you find out your direct ancestors are kind of directly responsible for the state of the world today, with terrible evil monsters threatening to run over the world and wipe out human civilization. I mean, yes, wasn't Sauron who was actually responsible for that, but your ancestor had the chance to stop him. He was literally right at the finish line, but was already corrupted. Imagine the burden you would feel about taking up the claim to the throne. The Doctor, I'm alive, I'm still alive. For Knox, Wilfred, they're gone then? Good though, if you could, let me out. The Doctor, yeah, Wilfred, only this thing seems to be making a bit of a noise. The Doctor, the Master left the nuclear bolt running, it's gone into overload. Wilfred, and that's bad is it? The Doctor, number, cause all the excess radiation gets vented inside there. Vinvoxide glass contains it. All 500,000 rads about to flood that thing. Wilfred, oh, well you better let me out then. The Doctor, except it's gone critical. Touch one control and it floods. Even this would set it off. Wilfred, I'm sorry. Look, just leave me. The Doctor, okay, right then, I will. Cause you had to go in there, didn't you? You had to go and get stuck. Oh yes, cause that's who you are. Wilfred, you were always this. Waiting for me all this time. Wilfred, no really, just leave me. I'm an old man. Doctor, I've had my time. The Doctor, well exactly, look at you. Not remotely important, but me? I could do so much more, so much more, but this is what I get, my reward. Well, it's not fair. Silence. Oh, I've lived too long. Wilfred, number. No please don't. No please don't, please. The Doctor, Wilfred, it's my honor. Better be quick. 3, 2, 1. I get what you mean. I really wasn't ready for Logan. I thought it was going to just be a great action movie where Wolverine finally gets to rip people to shreds. The raw emotions carried throughout the movie culminate into a bittersweet ending that both makes sense and is so fucking unfair at the same time. Futurama has a lot of moments that really tug at the heartstrings, like the episode where Fry finds what looks like a statue of his brother with his name on it, and he thinks that his brother stole his identity because he was always copying him when they were growing up. But then it turns out it was actually his brother's son who his brother named after Fry as a tribute. Arthur Morgan and John Marston did it for me. Red Dead Redemption 1 + 2 are probably the only games that have had me really into the story like a film or book does, and I really grew to like them, Arthur more than John really, but seeing that made me very sad. I didn't even want to play RDR2 after Arthur died BC. I thought that was it, finished. Only when I learned you can play as John of New Austin I came back. Same bro, that death fucked me up. I had it spoiled to me before I completed it that he's died. And yet when it came to it I still found myself begging and bartering with the fact this isn't it and that I wasn't happening. I was advised by my friends to choose good karma. Not that I needed that advice towards the end of the game, it felt natural then. I'm so glad I did though, as Arthur's death, though devastating, was almost bittersweet. He died as he wanted, staring into the sunset knowing he's done the best he could with the cards he was dealt. I'm getting a little emotional now, NGL. It's awful when it happens, then fast forward a few seasons later and you find out it's even worse because BoJack waited. Maybe she didn't have to die, but he was still more concerned about saving himself, and nobody noticed or cared about the discrepancies in his story because everybody assumed it was bound to happen. She was just another washed-up celebrity whose death was inevitable. That show really knew how to twist the knife. It's not even his death that gets me, it's the funeral. Father and Son by Cat Stevens isn't just an apartment title, it's a perfect song for it. And then when all the Ravagers turn up and start the fireworks and Kraglin just jumps for joy and screams, and Groot being cute and just everything about that scene, I only have to hear the very first bar of music to that song and I get chills. Which is kind of wild because Peter has spent 2 whole movies explaining that Yondu was abusive as fuck to him as a child. It took an actual cannibalistic homicidal eldritch abomination to make Yondu look like a good dad in comparison, and being played by Michael Rooker definitely helps. I took my brother to a Comic-Con when he was a kid and we went to get the actress's autograph. She asked my brother what his favorite episode was and he looked at her and deadpan said the one where you died. Every single time I think about that I die laughing. The body was one of the best episodes of Buffy, so I know what he meant, but the way he said it to her and the way her face changed from smiling to not will keep me laughing till the day I die. And a part in the book where Mrs. Weasley is trying to get rid of the boggart but gets traumatized because it keeps turning into each of her children dead. It turned into Fred and George dead together because even in her worst nightmares she couldn't imagine them being separated by death. There was this really amazing fine art of George and Angelina Johnson's wedding, where they're both happy and tearful. And Fred's ghost is also grinning with his arm around both of them. Edit, PL share if you can find it. Edit 2. This is Tom material, really. Fred was in the middle, and the 3 of them were laughing. George and Angie were in wedding dress, tux. The drawing style was pretty reminiscent of Mary Grandpré. Her death is meant to symbolize Harry's childhood and life at Hogwarts truly being over. She also represented Harry's connection and communication with the wizarding world, and also shows how their hunt for the Horcruxes has them truly alone and cut off. For everything JKR isn't, having her die is good writing. It is sad. So incredibly sad. Pet deaths always hit hard, but by no means pointless. I almost said this, but I think it would have been cheating cause my perception of this was kinda warped. You see, I thought I had in fact spoiled the outcome of this fight for myself. I had skimmed through a text that contained spoilers, and even though I stopped reading it, the one thing I got from it was that yeah, Auburn will win the duel. I was bummed by the spoiler, but well, I like Auburn, so at least it's good news. Right? Then the episode comes and I watch the fight all the time knowing that Auburn will win, not just guessing or expecting but knowing cause it was spoiled for me. But then, what happens. You can probably imagine my shock. Spent 15 minutes googling if this was actually real. The main character in Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Space. A few years ago I went back and replayed the whole game as an adult and it still made me cry. Even though I knew damn well and good they weren't going to stay dead. My brother was listening to a 9-bits version of the song that plays during that scene, and I was shook hard. I had to stop my game and go to the bathroom to try to not cry because of the emotions just the song alone brought back. And I'm not a particularly emotional person for the most part. La Lauch Britannia, the setup, the further realization that 2 seasons built up to this one moment, the music and final execution, the cast in shock, and then his sister. My God, her sobbing still makes me shiver, her saying that she didn't want the peaceful world he created if he wasn't in it, that she only really wanted to live with him. The emotions fucking flooded me. Root was such an amazing character. She was smart, fun, and beautiful. Her death truly was a turning point for the series. Worse is that she died after Shore realized she had feelings for her, when she never felt that way for anyone else, as she's unable to feel. The machine choosing her voice is sad too, even I misses her. Carter's death was sad too. She managed to bring down HR and arrest most of their members. It was an happy ending, everything turned out fine for almost everyone. Then there's that phone call. Basically every death on the series was sad. I remember watching Iron Man as a kid. I think I was around 7 or 8. My father had rented through Netflix, when they didn't stream but they sent DVD. Holy crap, I was enamored with Iron Man. I watched that movie over and over again. His death was so painful to watch, especially knowing he was leaving behind Pepper and Morgan and Peter. The way Pepper told him he could rest finally, and how she was toughing it out for him until his final breath. Anastasia Dula in Battlestar Galactica, home destroyed, fought in countless battles, found love, heartbreak, then rekindled her love, bought into a belief of a new home and worked towards it to only find it to be a nuked-out wasteland. Had one last dinner with her love and held on to that happiness for the rest of her life before her suicide. The show did an amazing job with all the side characters. As a girlfriend and mother, I couldn't imagine. It would be such a complex situation. Both me and my boyfriend kinda just glanced at one another because it's an impossible decision. Our kids need us both, and we need one another. So how do you even begin to make that decision? But the worst part is the episodes that follow, where you know the couple is completely gone. This is the one I came for. I was seething at Sang-woo. Ollie was there for his family, risking his life to have a shot at making their lives better. Sang-woo was there because he was an embezzling piece of shit in huge debt. Ollie's little face when he realized he had been betrayed after pouring out the rocks. Man, shit cut me up big time. I knew Ollie wasn't going to survive the moment it was revealed the pairs would be playing against each other. Sang-woo is the more plot-heavy and important character, but I had a false hope when he said he had a plan. Ollie's look of pain betrayal on his face when he was shot and killed still gets to me. I haven't watched past that episode yet, but I know I'll miss Ollie. There's a lot of seriously rough deaths in JoJo Caesar. But I think the one that destroyed me the most was Abashio. The mix of how sudden it was, it being the one time he shows any weakness, in helping the kids out with the ball being stuck, and Rincha's entire reaction plus the other characters' silent mourning and being sad over Abashio's death and their sadness and seeing Rincha in this state. It being so hard to keep inside. Bruno bites his own lip hard enough to draw blood. That whole scene never fails to make me cry. Same with Caesar's Senkei. Oh shit, my time to shine. Zack Fair in Final Fantasy Crisis Core. I got into Final Fantasy in middle school when I was going through a lot of shit. That was really the first game, fictional story I really got into and attached to, and I empathized with Zack especially because I had a whole I wanna be a hero complex. His death, the 7 compilation in general, was really designed to make you feel hard from the fact that the game makes you keep fighting until it's clear he's done for, to Cloud's heartbreaking outcry, to seeing him essentially be guided to heaven by Angel and telling Cloud, if you see Aerith, say hi for me. My dream back tattoo was angel wings, a buster sword, and hey, would you say I became a hero? ETA, not to sound cliche, but thanks for 100+ likes y'all. Like I said, I got into Final Fantasy when I really had nothing else, and even when I tried to tell people about, they mostly just looked at me funny as I babbled on about this kick-ass game that kept me out of some dark places. I love all. I'm sad I had to scroll so far to find this. It was my first thought. I remember laying in bed playing my PSP, fighting that final battle and thinking, is there really no way out of this? I tried really hard, ran through every option I had, but ultimately had to let that ending unfold as intended. Definitely cried myself to sleep that night, but the moments have stuck with me all these years. I really wish we could get an HD upgrade to that game. I'd probably cry over it again. Also, that tattoo idea sounds awesome. Chloe Price in Life is Strange. I feel like that game unlocked something in me emotionally. I wasn't like a mental stone wall before, but after finishing it a few years ago I have been a much more emotional person. Maybe it's just coincidence, but I think it's because of the game. The entire final episode was something else, but when I got to the Chloe dies ending I just watched in awe. As soon as her casket appeared I bawled. Really powerful stuff. Maybe not the hardest, but the first one I can remember, and this should place my age pretty well. When I was a child and watching Nickelodeon for my cartoon fix, I remember being very upset by the Rugrats episode that first brought up Shocky's mother. I believe it was a Mother's Day episode, and I think it was the first time I truly understood what that was, and as a 6-8-year-old, that was a very traumatizing thing to consider. I would have loved to see Snape and Harry after Voldemort died come to an understanding, if not friendship, at least mutual respect. Of course Snape gets romanticized a lot and I loathe that he was so abusive to so many kids. His hatred of Hart stemmed from his hatred of James, and in my opinion, I think his love for Lily was more obsessive than altruistic. Lily would have been heartbroken to see the hatred Snape perpetrated upon Harry, but Snape was also a hero of sorts and was integral to helping Harry rid the world of Voldemort. Not sure about hardest because it wasn't abrupt or unexpected, but Luke Skywalker probably had the longest impact. I was 27-28 when TLJ came out, and unlike Vader, Yoda, Obi-Wan, who were all dead before I was even born, Luke had been alive my entire life. Didn't cry in the theater BC. Like I said, it wasn't unexpected, but it was a long silent ride home, and I still sometimes just contemplate Luke Skywalker being dead. Tony Stark. I knew Evans was out, but I didn't know RDJ was out. I put myself on blackouts for movies I want to see after I watched the first trailer. My friend that I saw most of the MCU with died in 2019 shortly before Captain Marvel came out, so it was hard going to see that. But the emotion of Tony dying in Endgame was more difficult to process. I moved an hour away for about 3 years to finish my degree. We met on the middle to see Iron Man 3. That theater is right by the interstate. Someday in the future I'll probably drive by and see it torn down. It will be another sad day. Brian Rusk from the book Needful Things by Stephen King. I read that book when I was 11, and in the story Brian was 11 also. I think through reading his chapters, presenting the story through his perspective, I came to identify with him a great deal. Then he ended up shooting himself in the head with his father's shotgun in front of his younger brother because he felt such guilt about what Leland Gaunt made him do. And for like a week afterward it felt like a real friend had died. I remember being legitimately depressed. Beatrice Pryor. People hate on the series, but I read the books in middle school, and when I read the death scene for the first time, I was in my 7th grade English class during silent reading. As I was reading, I sat there and was trying not to turn into a puddle of tears as I was trying to keep myself from crying. My peers realized I was crying though and kept asking me what was wrong. This was my first time reading a character death, let alone crying over one. and I was embarrassed to tell the other students and my teacher that I was crying because one of my favorite characters died. I figured this would be a controversial answer because so many people hated on part 2, but yeah, you play as Joel in the first game. There's so much time spent with that character, and building the relationship with Ellie. I figured he would die in part 2 just because he was older, but I didn't expect it to be so brutal and abrupt. The Last of Us really becomes Ellie's story after that moment.